Mason, thanks so much for joining the show today, man. How are you?
Good. Thanks for having me.
So, what it's been like, or what has it been like this year covering the Pelicans? Obviously, you said you're not writing so much anymore, doing the podcast, the in the NO, but it's been a different year for all of us, man. How are you holding up? What has this been like for you?
It was a weird year overall, right? It just feels like it's been like three seasons in one over the past 12 months or so. But it's been all right. It's nice to have basketball back again, even though we're recording right after a game got canceled. but
Right.
but it's certainly been a season unlike any other. It's every game or every day feels like we're walking on eggshells, right? But it seems like every day the league is maybe getting a little bit more strict with their policies, and so you just hope that things can continue to play out all right, and players stay healthy.
Right. I mean, I think the Nets and the Heat played last night, and I saw the video of the security breaking the two Bam and Kyrie Irving up because they didn't want them to exchange jerseys and stuff like that. So
Yeah,
yeah, stuff is getting pretty strict. So
yeah.
yeah, pretty wild stuff. But let's dive right into it. Obviously, there's the big news of the day, and we'll talk about that here in a second. But the overarching theme so far in this what's been a 5-10 season for the Pelicans, lack of depth, some fit issues, etc. It's either panic or patience
Yeah,
among every Pelicans fan, at least on Twitter. And
yeah.
what I've gleaned from your Twitter, your feed, is that you are going more of the patience route. Could you elaborate on that for us? It's like I said, it's very, very much a dichotomy. So we'd love to hear your perspective on the whole thing.
Yeah, and it's frustrating too, right? Because I know that there is, there's two perspectives here. One, and I can relate as a longtime fan. Like my family had season tickets for the Hornets back in 2002 when they first moved to New Orleans. So it's not like it doesn't resonate with me that it's been a lot of the same for the last decade, essentially, ever since Chris Paul was traded. It's kind of been the same thing year after year. So I get it. But I mean, at the same time, Griff came on board a little over a year ago. It's a new thing for him. He's not, there's no, he's got no biases that come into place because he knows what's been going on with this franchise. He's trying to build something new here. And that takes time. I mean, they traded Anthony Davis last offseason. They traded Drew this most recent one. It's hard to replace those guys, even if you've got a Zion Williamson or the most improved player in Brandon Ingram. So it's just not all going to happen overnight. And, that doesn't mean that they can't try to do things to win more quickly. And so I think you can explain a lot of the moves they made this past offseason in a lot of different ways, as far as maybe giving them a chance to compete with guys who they thought are veterans who can help you win and also set the right culture, but also they don't fit the best. And so there's like this short-term and long-term balance here where you want to set this team up for success in the long term, but you don't want to just say we're mailing in this season outright from the start of the year. And to Griff's credit, this is the year to do that if you're going to, because you don't have many fans in the stands. So if you want to just kind of mail it in and go for a draft pick, this is the one year where it's kind of okay to do it, especially because the draft's supposed to be pretty nice next summer. So, they didn't, and things aren't going so well so far. But we're still early in the season. The team's played a pretty tough schedule. That was a brutal road trip they had, and so I think we could still see some turnarounds this season, in of itself.
Sure. And I'm pretty much on the same side as you are with the whole situation, vying for patience, especially with David Griffin and the new front office regime. The thing is, for me, when I look at this Griffin administration and everything, the front office that Griffin is running, is he kind of inherited a lot of the crap. I mean, he had to trade Anthony Davis essentially, and Drew Holiday. I mean, we don't know for sure, but he was on an expiring deal, probably want to get paid before he left or before his end of his career, and so he's probably in a situation where Drew, we don't want to give you that much money, so we're going to ship you out of town, get something in exchange for you. They got two guards and those picks, and obviously they've got those bevy of picks with the Anthony Davis trade as well. And so I think he's trying, or did make the best of a bad situation. Went out and got some veterans that can hopefully lead and establish some sort of culture in New Orleans. And I mean, I think you tweeted it out the other night. Maybe I saw it elsewhere. Actually, I think I saw it from Kevin O'Connor, his article mentioning that if they trade Steven Adams plus that Eric Bledsoe contract, they make enough room for a max contract. So
Yep.
there's things inner working. I mean, expecting it's not like the team is falling flat. Well, at the moment, it's kind of falling flat on its face,
Sure.
but it started with that Pacers loss, right? I think the transition from that loss was really ugly. Obviously, going into the road trip as well. So a lot of things just kind of combining to not go particularly well at this moment in time. And I think it's a quick reaction and it's we're prisoners of the moment. That's what I was going for
Yes.
right there. Prisoners of the
No
moment.
question.
That's what's happening. And the ultimate question here is, do you see any benefit to the way things are being operated right now? I mean, the team isn't tanking, they just look like crap.
Yeah.
Is this benefiting anyone short term, long term? What do you see the Pelicans getting out of their current state?
Yeah, I mean, it's in one. I think the silver lining from a long-term personnel perspective, I guess there are a couple things. One is maybe it forces your hand on the Lonzo Ball question, and so I know that that stuff's come out from Shams today about that they're listening to calls. And I mean, if you really believe in Na and Kyra, then you want to get those guys minutes sooner rather than later. And if it takes trading Lonzo Ball to make that happen, then that's one thing. The other that I've been looking at a little bit more today. So I was actually reading an article in the Athletic earlier about the Bucks and how they've changed their offense this year that in a way that's because of what's happened to Giannis and the team in the playoffs over the last couple of years, in a way that's making things in the near term tougher for Giannis to operate. It's new for him. It's not this 5-out set because they tried that in the playoffs and it didn't work. Teams still didn't give him any respect from 3-point range, certain players. So it kind of made me start thinking about how it relates to the Pelicans and where they are in their kind of trajectory and in their path to contention. And, you see what the Pelicans have done or not done with spacing. And you kind of be able to get a look at some of their players in a more stress-free environment. And I say stress-free because BI's already signed his contract now. He's not playing for a contract year. Zion's still a couple years away, and I don't think there's any doubt at this point, unless there's serious injuries, that he's not going to get a max offer from New Orleans. So, I mean, you're getting a chance to put these players into tougher situations. Whether it is, Zion, how he's responded quite well. I think you've seen every game he's improving, and he can score no matter what the spacing is inside. He's just, making himself a force. And then BI, on the other hand, he's struggling a little bit. He started off the season really nice. The playmaking was there, and then they started playing some good teams, and it hasn't gone as well. And so you're hoping these guys can continue to evolve and expand their skill sets in more of a lower stakes environment than, them coming up on a contract year or the Pelicans getting closer to being a real legitimate contender. So I think there are some benefits, even though the wins aren't coming, to having the team, respond this way or a rougher start to the season.
Sure. And, ultimately, I think should the Pelicans have, held on to Gentry, held on to Drew, then, I don't necessarily think the season would be all that much better, honestly. I mean, the defense wouldn't have improved. And I mean, not like it's playing all that great right now, but we'd be hearing the same thing from Pelicans Twitter and be, why didn't they fix this? Why didn't they change that? Why didn't they go get a new head coach? It's pick your poison right now.
Yeah. I think that's pretty accurate. I mean, and the defense, I think the strategy, I buy in to an extent to Stan Van Gundy's strategy. I think recency bias is a big factor here because they're playing teams that are very well constructed to beat the Pelicans. If you look at the Clippers, the Lakers, the Jazz, they have these great rim protectors like AD and Gobert, and they've got great 3-point shooting, which is going to beat that Pelican system. And a couple other games, they've been it really has looked like they've been victim to some bad luck. I mean, you see, I was just looking at how these teams like the Thunder and Pacers typically shoot on open threes, and they shot way better against the Pelicans than they typically do. And so there's some variance there, which of course is the nature of the beast when you talk about allowing teams to shoot a lot of threes. But I think, again, we're ultimately still talking about a small sample size here of like 14, 15 games. It's like less than 20% of the season. And so you hope that normalizes a little bit, but we'll see.
Sure. And then you factor in that I had a train of thought and I lost it. Come back to me. Sorry, I'm going to edit this out when it's on YouTube. I completely lost it. Wow. Okay. Sorry, that usually doesn't happen. Now, anyway, I think the contrary belief in where the Pelicans are at right now, in terms of going the route of patience, is what if these guys are just building bad habits? Brandon Ingram and Zion don't want to lose in this league. As soon as they can go elsewhere, they will. That sort of narrative. It's the fear of having the same thing happen with Anthony Davis, the same thing that happened with Chris Paul. And you made reference to that. Do you think there's merit to it?
We're still too early for that.
Okay.
Way too early. I mean,
Okay.
I think, Brandon Ingram, he's been great, but he also didn't win anything with the Lakers either. So it's not like a situation where James Harden in Houston, where he took them deep in the playoffs multiple times, and suddenly he doesn't like the direction of the franchise, which, I mean, that there's some merit there. That's a long story with him forcing the Chris Paul trade for Westbrook. He made his own bet in that one, but yeah. So I don't think Ingram's got the really has a reason to gripe yet at this point. Zion, same deal, second year of his contract. I mean, there's a lot of time left for these guys, and also, I mean, they're only doing so much on their own to really improve the chances of winning. I mean, Ingram and Zion are both not doing that well defensively. And so, they can complain all they want, but until they're impacting the game on both ends, they don't really have a leg to stand on as far as, we're not winning games. Like, well, I mean, they're both great players, obviously, but they're not in that elite tier yet to really, and you've got to be there consistently, I think, to get that type of respect. And so I think we're a long ways away from that.
Right. We've seen the improvement from both players, especially Brandon Ingram in terms of rotation and Zion in terms of one-on-one defense. The improvement, we've seen flashes of it. It's just not consistent, at all. And in terms of, what I was going for just a second ago was, I think all of those losses and just everything that kind of happened in that 9-game stretch just kind of conglomerated to being what we saw against the Timberwolves the other night.
Yeah.
It was,
yeah.
I mean, it was a snowball effect is what it was. I don't think that's representative of who the Pelicans are. I don't think it's representative of this team, the front office, the players. I mean, the coaches. It was just ugly. And we don't have to go down that path again, but
yeah. I mean, I think the Pelicans have had 2 bad losses this year, and that's the Hornets game and then the Timberwolves game. And so even the Timberwolves game, it was terrible. There's no excuse to be made for it. But it was a long road trip for those guys, and including the restrictions in place during a pandemic and what they can and can't do. You're pretty much cooped up in your hotel room for 2 weeks. Like, it's not a great situation to be in. So Again, they've got to beat the Timberwolves without Towns and Russell. Like, there's no excuse in that. But yeah, I think even the Thunder game was a prime example of the 3-point variance. I said, I don't think the Pelicans played badly in their loss against the Thunder. I think they just got caught by hot 3-point shooting. And then the Pacers, I mean, what are you going to do? That was a ridiculous fall. They should have won that game, but last minute things just crumbled. And so, yeah, the Hornets games and the Timberwolves games are the 2 that really bothered me this year. And to your point, I mean, they don't really have a marquee win yet. In Toronto is nice, but in hindsight, Toronto's playing okay. They're not playing great. And so apart from that, the Spurs are 9-8, so that's a good win, but they don't really have a win that's felt like, oh wow, this team looking good. So hopefully during the homestand here, they can put something together, but we'll see.
Sure. And on top of that, the Raptors are playing in Tampa, not in Toronto. So factor in the travel and everything for them. So yeah, it could have gotten that really good win against the Pacers. And obviously they've been competitive in some other games, but haven't been able to put it together.
Yep.
But, excuse me. Big news for the day. Apparently the Pelicans have been taking calls on Lonzo Ball and JJ Redick, one of the potential suitors for Zoe and JJ being Golden State. And that player that's been mentioned in a trade involving those 2 players would be Kelly Oubre Jr. Where do you stand on the whole thing? Do you see him being of value to the Pelicans? Do you see the Pelicans really needing to get rid of JJ or Lonzo?
So I've got some concerns about any guy who's going to be a free agent this offseason, because this was supposed to be a big year for a bunch of free agents to be available. A lot of guys got re-signed, and now you've got a lot of cap space, but not a lot of talent. So I am and that's kind of one of the reasons why I was okay with like the Steven Adams trade and some other moves that the Pelicans made to make themselves not really players in free agency this next offseason, is because the wells kind of dried up. And I'm really concerned about overpaying. So from that perspective, you know, I'm not, I wouldn't be, I think Oubre, I have to look, I think Oubre's a free agent next summer. And so I would be concerned about that. I don't know what his market's going to be. Guys like him, I think, are ripe to get overpaid, depending, you know, who can shoot and defend a little bit, but like there's not a ton of evidence that he makes his teams better. I think is a concern. But I mean, as far as JJ and Lonzo go, I think mentioned a little bit about Lonzo. I'm on board with moving him just because I want to get more minutes to Na and to Kyra. I think I think it's the right move, again, because I don't really trust the market for Lonzo this next summer and getting a price that I think makes sense to give him another contract. Not that I don't think he can't work in certain situations with New Orleans, but I just don't think he's worth the money that he might get. And then JJ, I mean, I figured the second he signed this contract, I figured he's a deadline guy to move. Just, you know, it was a 2-year deal. He's a vet who can shoot, space the floor for a team that's a playoff contender. I don't know how much he helps deep in the playoffs because he's so late in his career that his defense was never great, and now it's just not good at all. Yeah. And so I question how much he can really add value to a team that's really playing for a title. But you know, I think if they can get something of value for him at the deadline or sooner, then they should go for it.
Sure. And the way I stand on it, you know, I've seen people saying Oubre doesn't move the needle, which fine, true, absolutely. Lonzo's not moving the needle at this point either.
Right. Yeah.
And I mean, like you said, the free agency thing, he is going to be a free agent. He's set to make $14.5 million this year, and then he's a free agent after that. And I don't see any reason. I've heard he's wanting to get paid. I didn't look it up. Somebody said it on Twitter. So, yeah, right. Exactly. So yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, he is the guy, right? So I think the position that the Pelicans would want to get in a trade like that is like a backup 3-4. Like it's a guy who can plug into lineups with BI and Zion, or it's a guy who can spell those dudes. Because Melly, I mean, that's been one of my biggest criticisms of Griff so far. Is like he's just not good. I mean,
sucks,
and the fact that it seems like Griff was banking on him being a contributor this year is a knock. And it's not a huge knock, but it is a knock because the front court is kind of a disaster off the bench. I mean, Jackson Hayes, you've got to keep giving minutes to. I think he's getting better as season goes on, but it's a thin front court rotation. And so, and besides that, obviously, big wings are super hard to come by in the league in general. And so, if you can find a guy who can really plug in behind BI or Zion, because right now that guy's Josh Hart, behind BI anyway. So if you can, Oubre is kind of that, and so I can see that it makes sense from a plugging a gap in the rotation perspective.
Sure. And Hart's just getting too many minutes. Like, I love Josh Hart, but I think he's playing too much this year. And I think Oubre, while he is struggling from three, last year he shot 35%. I think he's a career 32%, which isn't good. But I think the Pelicans are shooting like 33% on the year. They were shooting 31. So 32 is an improvement. But I don't think the Pelicans are, I mean, the argument of him not moving the needle this season when the team's 5-10 and you're already saying that they're going to miss the playoffs, it just doesn't add up. Right. Yeah. I think that you can bring him in and, you know, you're not necessarily looking for, I mean, a guy who's going to come in and lead, because that's been the narrative around Steven Adams, around Eric Bledsoe. And we're hoping that Brandon Ingram becomes a leader of this team. And if he isn't already, I mean, that's been a conversation too. But I think Oubre comes in and he improves the effort. He brings effort on defense. He's another guy who's going to be a grit and grind kind of player. He's doing that for the Warriors right now. I don't know if you saw the Lakers game. He made some of those plays that won the game for them late. And I think he will bring that, whether or not that affects the rest of the team. You got a guy who's doing it.
Yep. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, who knows if that's the trade, right? I mean, it's been discussed or something like it. And, but I think that tells you, you know, at minimum, that's the type of position or type of skill set that the Pelicans would like to add to this team. And so, you know, I wouldn't be surprised if it's not Oubre, it's a skill set or a position like him.
Sure. Now, looking at Zoe and JJ, whether, like you said, whether or not it ends up being Golden State or not, making a move for either of these two players, do you see any other major players in a trade, any teams really sticking out to you that would want Lonzo, that would want a JJ, that have something to offer in return?
I think there are quite a few teams that would be interested in Lonzo. I don't think they would be interested in giving up that much, but I could see him. He's a polarizing player, right? If you can get a couple months of data on him to see how he fits the rest of your team, and then go into restricted free agency with him, and I mean, I think Denver, Miami. I think there are a few teams that could talk themselves into it. I think for JJ, I think a team like Boston could make some sense. I'm thinking about teams that like maybe like wouldn't are probably already title contenders and don't really think that he's going to be a guy who makes a difference, but maybe teams that are like trying to think they can maybe win, get an extra couple of buckets that can help them maybe win a series that they wouldn't otherwise win. I think Boston kind of falls into that group, or maybe other teams like them. But yeah, I mean, I think I wouldn't limit the scope of suitors for Lonzo Ball. I would limit your expectations on what's coming back in return.
Sure. And the teams that I list here for JJ are like Miami and Dallas. While they are struggling early on in the season, they're not shooting particularly well from three, but they're competitive teams. Dallas got Luka Doncic, Kristaps Porzingis. Miami was just in the NBA title game last year. And yeah, they don't have Jimmy Butler. They're off to a rough start. I don't know how JJ would really impact that so much and help them, but down the stretch, I think he would. And I like the point about Boston too. I think he'd be a good fit there.
I would be very happy with. I'm a recent the guy I've been having an eye on for a little bit now is Jalen Brunson from Dallas. I think if you're going to move two guards at once, and I'm okay with getting one back. And I like Brunson. I think he's not a starter. He's 6'1". I don't think he's a guy who can never be even though he's been starting recently for the Mavs, but I think long term he's not a starter on a good team, but he's a damn good backup guard. And but he's also a free agent next summer. So that's another concern. But if they're going to make a move with a couple of these guards and you want to get like one guard and one 3/4 hybrid back, and you're talking about Dallas, I would see how available Jalen Brunson is from them.
Sure. And I mentioned Maxi Kleba. I don't know if you can get it in
They're not moving
like
him.
That. Yeah.
I think he's too good defensively.
Right. I love that guy. I think he would be a great fit for the Pels right now too. But anyway, Lonzo, obviously, like you said, big market. He's young, got that restricted free agency coming up. I think he would be an awesome fit in Golden State for what he does. And I know the Knicks absolutely love him. So there's that. But I don't know what they'd be willing to give up for him, but we would see. Now, transitioning a little bit to some more of those overarching topics. Talked about Zion a little bit in that first segment. Do you think it's necessary the way the national media and some of the local media are just roasting this guy for not playing incredible defense? I mean, he's not the problem at the end of the day to me. He's just so damn good offensively that he's scoring whatever it is, 23 points a game, something to that effect. That how can you expect him to be a 20-year-old in his second year where he's played 36 games to even play honestly adequate defense? Like, I think it's unfair.
Yeah, I agree wholeheartely. I think you can, if you're going to split hairs, like he's been really bad on defense, but I also think who gives a shit because like exactly like you said, I mean, like give me another year or two before we start roasting the guy for what he can't do. Can we talk about how a 20-year-old is doing transcendent things offensively? Let's talk about what he is doing rather than like the things that he hasn't done as well as you might hope. I mean, I think part of it is like he came into the draft as not only this transcendent offensive player, but he's a guy that everyone was already talking about. Like, can you make him, his athleticism and his IQ for the feel for the game? Can you make him into not a Draymond on defense, but someone who's going to be good enough to make him a 5 for long stretches? And so he's not there yet. Like, I don't know if he ever will get there, but I think it's way too early to rule it out. And so, I mean, I'm just watching him get better every game. I think he looks better right now offensively than he's looked at any point in his Pelicans career. And even those games right before the stoppage of play. And so, I mean, let's just take it one game at a time with this guy. So yeah, I'm with you. I don't see a cause to be seriously concerned yet.
Sure. And the thing for a lot of people right now, I think is effort for him, because the one play that I'll reference is against the Jazz, and that I think I've talked about already on the podcast before. I talked about it on Propels Talk last week. Was there's a play where there's a fumble under the basket, and I think Rudy Gobert grabbed the ball, passed it out to Joe Ingles at his feet, and then Zion proceeded to jog out there, and Joe got an open three. I mean, those are the issues, but I just don't know how you change that immediately. I mean, it's been the conversation all of these media sessions. It's been effort, it's been intensity on the defensive end of the floor and taking personal responsibility. And I mean, it's not just Zion. We've been hearing it from or about other players on the team, and it's clear. I mean, you watch the tape and you listen to the media sessions, it's like, are there any other actual problems with this team?
Yeah.
And I mean, how do you change that? Because Stan Van Gundy, that's clearly his focus. He wants that to be different with this team. And I mean, obviously Pels fans do too. What do you do?
Yeah, I mean, it takes repetition, and I think Stan's the right guy to kind of breed that type of a defensive culture and mindset. But I mean, fast off season, like 2 preseason games, not a lot of time to practice, and also I could be totally off the mark here, but I don't watch much college basketball, but I know that the 3-point shot is only even more recently catching on in college hoops than as it has in the pros. There's just not as much of an emphasis on it's even, and also the 3-point line, that the depth or the distance is different by parts of the court. And so the corner 3 specifically is a much higher value shot, I believe, in the NBA than it is in college, relatively speaking. And so maybe there's just not as much of an emphasis on rotation out there. Again, I'm spitballing here because I generally speaking, I think it's going to take time regardless. But I mean, we watch on TV all the time and we see it and we want to yell it, but it could be a situation where it takes a little bit longer time for a player to grasp moving from college to the pros.
Sure, that could definitely be a factor. And I think I don't want to blame, we don't want to put blame on things. We just want things to be fixed, right? That's the way that Stan Van Gundy goes about things. Yeah. And I think, again, this is, like you said, it's going to be a gradual thing. It's going to be repetition. It's going to be, I mean, instilling the culture that he wants to instill. The quote that a lot of people took, I tweeted it out as it was happening in the media session after the last game, where he said, I think he was asked, I think it was by Christian Clark, about the effort, about what was going on that end. And Stan Van Gundy said he didn't know. You'd have to ask the players. And that caused an uproar on Pelicans Twitter, let me tell you. And it sounded a little bit like Alvin Gentry when he said he didn't think our effort was an issue. I mean, obviously he knew it was an issue, but it sounds reminiscent of Gentry when he says, I don't know, or what have you. I mean, does it need to come down to we're going to bench guys who aren't bringing that? Does it need to come down to we're going to cut guys? Does it need to come down to we're going to trade guys?
This brings me back to a more philosophical point around coaching in general. And if you haven't, read Seth Partnow's article about the responsibilities of a head coach, and just this is to anyone. It's one of my favorite articles because it really talks about all the things that they are responsible for outside of just like being a head coach. It talks about like managing the people in the locker room, managing the media, like all these different things that they have to do. And then put that in line with my other perspective, which is the majority of coaches in this league, head coaches, aren't moving the needle significantly one way or the other. You've got a few coaches that are truly elite. You've got a couple that turn over because they're not very good at all. And then the rest are like, it's about the talent in your players. And so if you don't have the right players with the right mindset, I don't know what the move is as far as benching or trading or what have you. But I mean, I think there's a lot that goes into it, and a coach can only do so much. And I said this with Gentry, I'll say this with Stan Van Gundy, with anyone else. It's something that if it's truly an effort or mindset, basketball IQ issue, it takes time if it ever can be corrected. But I think really it's a share of Van Gundy's going to take lumps for his players at certain points. He's also going to make the players accountable at certain points. It's up to him and the rest of the coaching staff to figure out when to do those things. And so I trust Stan because he's done this for years. And so again, it's early. We'll see how it plays out, but I feel like he's done a decent share of both. And so he, like everything he says is, have to ask the players. it's tongue in cheek, and it's also like he's creating some accountability. It can't just he's going to take lumps, but not every time. And so it's finding the right balance, I think.
Okay, that's fair. I think I had some frustration in it too because Antonio Daniels, I don't know. I'm assuming you watched the broadcast from New Orleans. I think it was just a local game anyway. Yeah, it was the Timberwolves.
Mm-hmm.
And he had mentioned that when his starters, when he was playing with the Spurs, Greg Popovich would pull all the starters if they didn't bring energy. He's like, this is bull crap. What are you doing? Get off the court. And AD brought that up. And, obviously Stan didn't hear him say that, but I would have loved to see some of these guys, the Kyras, the Wenyans off the bench, because just watch 5 minutes of Wenyen Gabriel's tape on YouTube. That dude, he might make some really dumb mistakes. He doesn't know basketball all that well. He's going to foul, but he's going to give a damn. And we just weren't seeing it. And I think you could say the same thing, not exactly about Kyra, but we've seen a lot of good stuff from Kyra. Kyra gives a damn. And I would have loved to see him play the other night against the Timberwolves. And I just want to see them play in general because this team is not looking all that great. Do you see the logic behind not playing these guys? Is it the desire to try to, I don't know, have the guys that are actually playing figure it out on the court? Is it because Wenyen's not ready? Is it because Kyra's not ready? What do you see?
So hard to say with Wenyen. I mean, I think at the start of the season he's injured, and I know that Stan pointed to the fact that he hadn't practiced much. So I don't know. With Kyra, I think it's clearly he's playing himself into more and more minutes. I think also, again, it's Stan trying to figure out the right buttons to press with these guys in his first year as head coach. And I think I think he gets it. He knows, like what we were talking about, it's a long ass road trip, and they played a lot of good teams in that road trip. And yes, the Minnesota game was a disappointment. But also I don't think there was any reason to just blow stuff up and just go to an all bench unit until that game. And so you could have made the case at certain points to do that. Sure. But I think also, I think if we get back now and see the same types of things happening in New Orleans, then there are problems. And I think you'll see Stan make some tangible changes rather than just kind of like talking through it.
Okay. Touche. I think my impatience caught up with me. Usually I'm pretty patient. I try to be the even keeled dude, try to bring us back from the high highs and bring us up from the low lows. But that game was rough. I was sitting right here in my room going, what the hell is happening? Do something different. And that's what I called for in the podcast afterward as well. But the ultimate solution here to right the ship, what do you see that being? Do you see it being, they're home now? Do you see it being the fact that they can get their feet back under them from this stretch of losses, maybe get Kyra some more minutes, maybe Wenyen comes back? Is it making a move at the deadline? What's the ultimate goal? Is it just patience? What do you see?
I mean, it depends. Yeah, it depends on what your goal is. I think we should see an uptick here that with a stretch of home games against a softer schedule will start to help things. I mean, this team was supposed with anyone you ask, this team's around a 500 team before the season. Like that was the expectation. And 5-10, they're not there, but also like you flip the craziness of the Indiana Pacers game and I mean, you're getting closer to it. So like, again, like it's only a couple of things here and there that separates like a 7-8 team from this 5-10 team we see here today. So, I mean, I think all things considered, win losses aside, this team isn't that far off from where I expected them to be. They're worse than I expected. Don't get me wrong, but they're not like drastically worse. I think they played some teams that haven't really catered to their strengths. And so, I think moving on from Lonzo and giving minutes to Kyra and Nikhil will help some fans kind of feel like we're at least moving in a direction. Cause I think that's the struggle for a lot of people is that it feels like we're kind of running in place because we've got these vets, but also we're not winning games. So I think that may help. I think there's going to be some regression to the mean from the 3-point perspective. This team is they're not great, but they're also not as bad as they've shot the ball from 3-point range, and they're not going to give up. They're giving up uncharacteristically high percentages from three, even with the strategy in place to allow threes. So I mean, like there's a few things that are going to regress to the mean, and I think they'll be better, but it all depends on what your expectation is. I don't think this team's suddenly going to become great. But I think there certainly is room to improve.
Sure. One more Pelicans question, and then I want to ask you about the NBA protocol and approaching the All-Star game here. What do you think is a realistic choice that you would be absolutely for? Should the Pelicans move Lonzo? Should the Pelicans move JJ? Ultimately, they end up with a player or two, a player and a pick, something to that effect. What's the ultimate? You say, damn, the Pelicans made out well on that, but also the other team, obviously, it was a fair trade.
Yeah. So I mean, if we're just talking like asset return, I don't think Lonzo or JJ is going to net you first. So we can probably just get that out of the way. Sure. You can build up a stockpile of maybe a couple of seconds to use in a future trade, which is like not sexy, but it's something. But as far as like, so Schmidt made this recommendation like a week or two ago, and I thought it was a really intriguing idea. With Sacramento and looking at, he mentioned Harrison Barnes, and I thought it was interesting because he's I think he's a really nice fit for this team in the hole they have in the roster. You would get a pick along with him because he is overpaid. And so if you could move Zoe and or JJ and get back a player like in that mold of Harrison Barnes, it could be someone else, but someone who's in that mold, overpaid, and maybe you get an asset alongside him to take the money. Again, this comes back to me not really caring if they have cap space for next offseason or not. As long as they're under the tax, which they're really close to right now, as long as they can figure out a way to get under the tax. So maybe it's like going out as Lonzo, JJ, and Melly, that gets you up to like 25 million plus. And you take back a guy like Harrison Barnes. I have to look and see those other players that really fit that mold of an overpaid 3/4 hybrid type player. I think that's a move that's a win all the way around. You get more minutes for your young guards. You get a player who can help fill out the rotation in a place that you don't have a warm body right now, honestly. And maybe even if depending on the contract of the guy you're taking back, you could get a nice pick out of it. And so, not like we're talking like probably like lottery protected at best. So nothing that's going to materialize to something awesome, but that's the type of structures I might be looking at if I'm New Orleans, and it's not like just as simple as Kelly Oubre. So that's I think where I am on it.
Okay. I didn't just see. I saw this a few weeks ago, and I think I saw it earlier in the fall from David Fisher from the Bird Rights. The mention, it was from Shamit too, and then Fletcher Mackel, who's also been on the podcast, talking about possibly getting Lauri Markkanen. I don't know if that's possible. I would love that.
Hot, yeah. It's been a really it's been a hot topic because both fan bases feel similarly about those two players. Like the Bulls are like, yeah, Markkanen's fine, but is he worth the money he might get as a restricted free agent? Mm-hmm. And New Orleans is sitting over here saying the same thing about Lonzo. And the skill, like the Markkanen plays the position where the Pelicans could use some more depth. And so I think before the season, you could have maybe talked them into a swap. I think now Markkanen's played decently well to start the year, and Lonzo's kind of cratered a little bit. So I think the Bulls would ask for a little bit more in that trade. But if you're just going to swap those two players, I'd be all for it, even if it's just a rental and you're not, at least it gives you the option with Markkanen to see how the market plays out. I think Lonzo's a bigger risk for a huge contract because of the position he plays than Lauri as a stretch four. I think those are more common. But yeah, I mean, that's the name we talked about as well.
Sure. What I'm thinking is probably Lonzo and a first, maybe a first and a second, maybe two firsts even. What do you see? Do you think that's too much? Do you think that's fair?
Stay the hell away from. Stay the hell away from that. I'm just too. He's going to be a free agent next summer, and it's just too risky. I don't know what. All it takes is one crazy team to give him a wild offer, and then you've traded two firsts for a rental. And I think it's too. I mean, I don't think it would take nearly that much to pry away from the Bulls. So yeah. If it's a first, it better be heavily protected. But I would hope that maybe you could do it for Lonzo in a couple of seconds. But who knows?
Cool. Now, we just talked about the Pelicans. Obviously, the Pelicans and the Spurs game just got postponed, unfortunately. We know a bunch of other games have been postponed due to COVID protocol. And now, per Woj last night, the NBA and NBA Players Association are having discussions about still potentially putting together an all-star game. To me, this is a big freaking yikes. I do not like this idea at all. You're shaking your head yes. What do you think?
Yeah, this is the recipe for disaster. I mean, the NBA continues to talk out of both sides of their mouth on this. They continue to just make the protocol more stricter. The Pelicans Spurs game is a perfect example of that. No player on either team had contact tracing issues. It was a staffer on both teams, and so I mean, clearly, as fans, we want to see them play, but they're doing the right thing. They're being diligent about this process. I don't understand. I don't really get how you can do an all-star game, like how you can rationalize it. If it's to raise money, donate the damn money. Like the risk is not worth the reward here to me. I don't see it.
I'm pretty sure the NBA has the money. Yeah. like what? It's just, it's the exact opposite thing of that you do during a pandemic. And I mean, they already forced the bubble. They already are playing basketball and traveling all over the country. It's just the biggest money grab ever. It just doesn't make any sense. And one more thing before we let you go. Sure. It is a sad day in the NBA world. It's the anniversary of Kobe and Gianna Bryant's death, and untimely death. Also those families that were with them. Do you have a favorite Kobe memory? Anything that stick out to you from his career or who he is?
I can't say I do as far as a favorite memory of him, because it was always me being mad that he was beating my team. So, but I mean, it's it is sad. I remember I was playing ball when it happened or when the news came out, and it was just like we all stopped. Like I feel like there's not much that could have just stopped us all from playing ball. But finding that out, it was like mid game. Someone off the floor just brought it up, and the game just came to a halt. And it's the type of news that, I mean, you hate to hear, obviously, but just that there's not much that can rock the NBA world like that. And it's it's great to see all the great memories being shared now. I mean, I feel like in the moment, it's just you're trying to grapple with loss. But now, like, you look back a year later, and obviously it's still awful, but you're able to like shine a light more on the memories and good things, which is, I think, at least a little bit refreshing to see. But I think my experiences about Kobe kind of exemplify the type of competitor he was, because all I remember is him beating the teams I liked. So shows kind of player he was.
Right. An absolute killer. The last memory I have of Kobe was not the last memory, but the gleaming memory. The one that really sticks out to me is when he stood up on the scorer's table after they won that 5th title and was just, screaming, and his relationship with Pau and everything. Just I'm not one to get upset over celebrity deaths, excuse me, but that one was tough to get through. This NBA community really, NBA Twitter is a ruthless place, but they really came together that day, and shined a light on somebody that brought a lot of joy and even some pain to some NBA fans alike. So, but because of who he was and the competitor he was, I almost called you Shamit. Mason, thanks so much for joining us today.
Looks so much alike.
Right. Mason Ginsberg on Twitter. Go follow him. He's got a bunch of good content over there via In the NO, I should say. And
In the know. No, you got it right. That's
okay. In the know. Okay. There we go. In the know, as well as he's, promoting some of that content from Bourbon Street Shots, and always tweeting Pelicans too. So go follow him, Mason Ginsberg, on Twitter. Mason, thanks so much for joining us today.
Yep. Great time. Thanks.